Hi, this is Eric Martin with Board Game Geek. I'm here today looking at Skyward, a game by Brendan Evans, published by Rule and Make, that is for 2 to 4 players who are, in theory, working together to build a skyward city. All right, airborne city that's reaching up into the clouds. But of course, you're not actually working together. You want to do better than everyone else. Score more points than them and look like a big shot in front of the rest of the world. How does this work? Here are the components in Skyward. You have a deck of 85 cards that you shuffle and place on this central board. This is an organizing principle here. You have a big pile of cogs and a warden token that initially is given to the player with the most experience in the game. Me, in this case, since I have played and you likely have not. You have an expansion pack of 24 Allegiance and Discord cards that you can add in after a few games. I have not got there yet. Each round is relatively simple. Whoever has the warden token is going to draw 8, 12, or 16 cards based on the number of players. They look at these cards face up and divide them into as many piles as the number of players. And the cards come in generally 2 types. You have buildings, which have a cost to build on the side here. The buildings come in 4 colors. They have a point value. They tell you how many copies are in the deck, and they have some ability that we'll get to in a moment. You have faction cards, which are effectively currencies. If you want to think of Alhambra with different color currencies, which are going to be used to build different things. You have some black border cards, which will be played sometimes like buildings, but often they are vehicles or critters and not used that way. So the warden will divide the cards into piles equal to the number of players, add the warden token to one of the piles, and then the player to their left will choose one of them and add them to their hand. Let's say they take this. And we go around, left, left. Well, in a 2-player game, I get what's left. Whoever takes the warden tile will now go first in the second part of the round, in which you can launch from your hand, that is build, at most 1 building by paying the cost shown on the side. After that, you can discard 3 cards to get a cog, and cogs are jokers that can be used for any faction color in order to build buildings. After that, if you have more than 6 cards in your hand, you have to discard down to 6. So you better throw them away to get cogs rather than throwing them away and getting nothing. I could, because the warden, whoever takes the warden for the round gets a cog, I could spend the cog, I could spend this currency, and I could build a foundry. And when I do that, it has a comes into play effect that gets me 1 cog. So I spend the cog, spend this, get another cog for building it. Some cards have a lightning bolt on them, and when you take the cards from the central split, you must play them immediately. So I would have put this airship down into my airspace, and it has a bonus scoring thing. It's worth more if I build an airship bay. Will I see the airship bay? Maybe. It depends on whether we even get to it in the deck, or whether I choose a pile that has it in there. So if I build this, the other cards remain in my hand. I choose not to discard them. My turn is over. My opponent took these 2 green cards and a green building that cost 2 green and something else. They cannot build this, so they just keep that in their hand. It takes a few turns to get going, depending on how the decks are, is randomly shuffled, how many faction cards come out, which building assortments you get. And we've generally noticed over our 3 games that the first round or 2, you often don't build anything. And then suddenly you start getting lots of faction cards, you're throwing things away to get under the 6-card limit, and suddenly you are flooded with cogs and faction cards, and you have more than you need. You, in theory, could build more than one, launch more than 1 building a turn, but of course you can't unless you have the wall or one other blue card that lets you launch an additional blue building after you build that. So it's this weird sort of economy that feels initially very sparse, and then suddenly you're sort of swimming in money, and it just piles up at the end. It's a little odd that way. I have the warden token, so I'm going to split for the next round. And you continue in this manner. I turn over the cards. There are no faction cards. There is no income. No way to build something this round, unless you already had a bunch of faction cards, or you take the pile with the warden, which maybe my opponent will want to do. However, I split these up. So I'm going to put these negative pigeon cards with a warden, and one other green card. All right. And now they're going to choose something. Maybe they take the pigeons, which is going to give them negative points, but they'll get this with the joker, and they'll be able to build, etc., etc. Cards, in addition to the lightning bolts for immediate play, and the tent-like symbol for an comes into play effect, well, you have flags, and they give you an endgame scoring. So this is worth an additional 3 points on top of the 2 points if you have a data node in your airspace at the end of the game. Well, the data node's over in this pile. There's 2 more in the deck. Maybe you'll get one. You have an ongoing effect with the circle here, such as the wall, which is one of the 2 ways in which you can launch more than one building on a turn. You can now build up to 2 if you have the wall. You need 3 yellow factions first to build it, so good luck with that. All right, so you're going to take these choices and then continue play. Yes, you have 4 pigeons in the game, and they cost you points unless you have a rookery. Will you get the rookery? Maybe. We finished our 2 two-player games, and we never even saw it because we didn't get through a portion of the deck. You do have a rocket cat available that can send the pigeon off to someone else. So the weird little takes that in there. There's a jump gate that lets you build a building, choose an opponent, and then you have to swap building of your choice with my jump gate. Hope you haven't built only one thing that you really want, because it's coming to me. So, little tension there with some attack elements. And you continue building until you have 6 buildings in your airspace, and as soon as someone has 6 buildings, that triggers the end of the game. You finish the round, and then you're going to score points. Alternatively, if the deck runs out, then you finish the round, and again, see who has the most points at that time. All right? So you look for all the flags, +1 for each green building, add up all the points, and see who wins. There's an overview of Skyward, which I played 3 times now on a review copy from Passport Game Studios, which is distributing the title for Rule and Make in North America. I played twice with 2 players and once with 3, and as you might expect for a game in which the central mechanism is taking cards and dividing them into piles, when you go from 2 to 3 players, you increase the amount of time to play because now you suddenly have 50% more cards confronting you, and you're trying to decide how to divide them up and make it so that everyone sort of thinks they get what they want, but really you end up with the pile of stuff that you want, which doesn't often happen. The 6-card building limit works as you might expect because it gives you room to grow and put together scoring combinations, such as a yellow building where you get additional points if you get 1 of each other color building, or a green building that if you get 3 other buildings of the same faction gives you additional points. You have to put all those together, and that those would each take up 4 of your 6 available spaces. So it gives you this tight constraint in which to try to score. There's a few engine building elements where if you build certain buildings, you might get a cog or you might get a discount in these certain ways. But again, you're only building 6 buildings at the most. So there's kind of a limit into how that engine structure works. It sort of works purposely to give you a small space to work in, and then just as you're starting to ramp up a little, it feels like, oh, okay, now it's time to end. Except for what I mentioned earlier with the additional money that you have left over that didn't get spent. So, a little weird economy there. One odd element with the deck is that it contains 85 cards, which is not divisible by 8 or 12 or 16, which are the player counts. So in our 3-player game, we finished the round in which we took the last group of 12 cards, and there was only a single card left in the deck. And if we had had an additional round, there would only be 1 card. So it's just going in one pile, and one player is getting that, and you're building on from there. With 2 and 4 players, you could have a final round with 5 cards in it. It just seems like an odd deck structure for something that you would expect to be divisible by both 8 and 12 and 16. Why would you not have that? I don't know. This is my internal organization nerd that's coming out that wants to make this right. Add 7 more cards to the deck. Make that happen. Maybe that's what the expansions are for. For me, Rule and Make flowed best with 2 players because I knew that whatever I wasn't getting was going to end up in the hands of my opponent. And I had to account for that. I had to try not to give them things that would work well together. With 3 players, that's kind of out of your hands, even if you're the warden, because however you want to divide things, you don't know exactly who's going to take which pile, where things are going to go, and what you're going to end up with. So you try to leave yourself more options as you're building things. If you set yourself up for one of those big scoring buildings where you need A, B, and C in order to make it happen, good luck. You might have a real challenge to get that done. So there you go, an overview of Skyward.